Hi guys, Olive here. Today I'm here to bring you my October 2016 wrap-up. This video will not have a TBR component for November because November is Nonfiction November, I'm sure you've heard by now. If you are interested in what I will be reading in November, the link to my Nonfiction November TBR will be in the description box below for you. But without any further ado, I'd like to talk to you about the books that I read in October. The first book I finished was an audiobook, and that was The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. This was a book off of my Young Professional TBR, and it is a book all about habits, how they control our behavior, where they reside in the brain, what factors need to be in place to create a new habit, how good habits can have positive effects on other aspects of our lives, while bad habits can really gain control over our lives if we let them. In this book, I learned just how powerful habits are. They are powerful to the point that the human brain can still develop them even if it has sustained other trauma. There was a study of a man in this book who had lost almost all short-term memory function. His brain had been greatly damaged by disease and he was no longer able to remember things in the short term. And yet his brain was still able to develop new habits even with these limitations. Because habits are so powerful in human psychology, they are heavily used in marketing. Similarly to Moonwalking with Einstein, I just absolutely love this book. I tore through it. I found it fascinating, super engaging. When I have seen critiques of books similar to this one, I see them frequently called pop science-y books, and I would disagree with that. The science in this book is not watered down. It is simply applied to our everyday lives in a very understandable and interesting way. I love science. I love learning about science, and I definitely love seeing how science is present in my everyday life. And because of that, I love books like these. I definitely got some good ideas about how to develop some good habits and to break some bad ones. If you are still in the market for a great nonfiction book to read during Nonfiction November, I would highly recommend this one. Unfortunately, that was the only audiobook I got through this month. I am still in the middle of Special Topics in Calamity Physics. I have not been able to finish that because the bulk of my audiobook listening time is at work, and currently I am training someone. If you're asking yourself, why on earth would she be training someone when she just started that job over the summer? You're asking a good question. But anyway, I lost some of my audiobook listening time because of that, but it's okay. I should have more time to listen to audiobooks this month. So the rest of the books that I read in October were in print. The next book I finished was The Trespasser by Tana French. This is the 6th book in the Dublin Murder Squad series, and I buddy read this with Sabrina at Unmanaged Mischief and Rinsey at Rinsey Reads. Can you hear that sound? That was my heart breaking. This is a really difficult book to talk about because largely I am just so disappointed in this book. If you've been following along with the Dublin Murder Squad series, you can probably tell because of the 4th and 5th books, and certainly because of this book, that Tana French is trying new things. She's trying to take the series in different directions. She's trying new things with her writing. And that is certainly admirable. But unfortunately for me, it just did not come together in this book. This book is focused on Detective Antoinette Conway, who we did meet in the 5th book, The Secret Place. No one in the squad really likes Antoinette. She and her partner, Stephen, who we also met in the last book, are assigned to all the domestic cases, the easy cases, the cases that no one wants. So one night after an all-night shift, they are called to a murder scene, and it appears to be a slam dunk of a case. A girl is found dead in her home. A guy that she is dating was supposed to come over. The evidence most clearly points to him. But there are some things about this case that are bugging both Stephen and Antoinette, and one of the things that is bugging Antoinette specifically is the fact that she thinks she knows this girl from somewhere. So just like all of the other books in the Dublin Murder Squad series, that's a very strong premise, and it started off with a lot of promise. But unfortunately, with all of the focus that was on Antoinette's character throughout the whole book, I just didn't find her a strong enough character to carry all that attention. Normally, Tana French books are not so super focused on the main character. There are different threads that you're following. There are different characters that you can be paying attention to. The burden is not always on the narrator of the book to be carrying the load of the whole story, but in this book it was. I ended up giving it 3 stars instead of 2 or 2.5 because the last 100 pages did pick up. It did start to feel like a more Dublin Murder Squad series-esque book by the last 100 pages, but I cannot feel justified in giving it any more than 3 stars, as much as I may want to because it is a Tana French book, because for the most part, when I think back on this book, I cannot remember what was happening during the first 350 pages of it. So if you are a fan of the Dublin Murder Squad series and you want to go ahead and pick up this book, it is still worth a read. Her writing is still good, but it is not the strongest of the series by far. The next book I finished, I ended up liking much better than The Trespasser, and that was Goddess. This is historical fiction that is rooted in the very real life of 17th century badass Julie d'Aubigny. Kelly Gardner did admit that a few things are fictionalized in this book, and a few of the events had to be fleshed out, but the majority of this book is based on real recorded events that happened in Julie's life. Julie is born an illegitimate child to a fencing master in the court of the Sun King. She learns how to fence brilliantly from him. She is then taken as the mistress of the king's master of horse. From there, she runs away with her fencing master. Then she falls in love with a nun. She runs away when she is sentenced to burn at the stake. And then within a year, she is a star of the Paris Opera. I love the way that this book was written. It's very unique. It is told as if Julie is recounting her life experiences to a priest when she is on her deathbed, giving him her confession. You are only hearing her voice. It is as though that priest is just writing down word for word what she is confessing to him. So we don't hear his voice at all, although we can assume some of his reactions to what Julie is telling him because of the things she says to him. She will always have snide little remarks for him on the way that he is reacting to her somewhat eyebrow-raising escapades. I feel like the way Julie's character is written really gives her the proper respect. She is callous, but she's also sensual. She's hard-headed, but she's also resilient. You know that she could absolutely kill you in a fight, but you still see her vulnerabilities. Also, what was really interesting about Julie's character was just how gender fluid she was. She very frequently dressed as a man, especially when she went out in public. And yet, when she was on stage in the opera, she was dressed very much like a woman. The idea of gender and how Julie sees herself is discussed a lot in this book as well. If you enjoyed The Queen of the Night by Alexander Chee, I highly recommend that you check this book out. And then during Dewey's 24-hour readathon, I finished 3 books. The first of those was A Most Novel Revenge by Ashley Weaver. This is the 3rd book in the Amory Ames mystery series. I finished up the last chapters of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which I read with a large group of BookTube ladies. And I read Slade House by David Mitchell. If you'd like to hear my opinions on any of those 3 books, I did do a Dewey's 24-hour readathon wrap-up, and the link to that will be in the description box below. I ended up DNFing Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. This was a book that I really wanted to love. It was a buddy read that I was doing with Hillary of Your Robot Friend and Kate Howe. I made it about 100 pages into this book before I DNF'd it. I know Kate DNF'd it, and I think Hillary did the best of the 3 of us. I think she made it through most of this book. This book was really not sitting very well with me when we first started buddy reading it at the beginning of the month. I thought it was kind of boring. I really didn't understand what the point of anything was. And then I kind of lost focus when I started buddy reading Rebecca with everybody. I was really focused on that book. So I decided to put this down and take a break and then come back to it to see if that helped anything. When I picked it back up, I read about 5 pages and just thought, I don't want to read this. I know a lot of people love this book, and if you do, I really want to hear from you in the comment section below what you love about it, because I'm just finding myself not understanding. I totally get the appeal of quiet books and books that make a subtler statement, but I just didn't think anything was happening in this book. So again, if you love this book, please come and have a chat with me about what you love about it, because I really feel as though there's something I'm missing here. And this last book I finished on the night of Halloween, which I thought was pretty fitting. I read Bats of the Republic by Zachary Thomas Dodson. If you know anything about this book, you know that it is an illuminated novel, meaning that it contains different forms of media, some illustrations, lots of creative storytelling going on in here. You have maps and handwritten letters. Certainly keeps your attention and does things much differently than a traditional novel would. The description of this book calls it genre bending, and I find myself agreeing with that. It is very difficult to categorize this book. It's difficult to explain it, and it's difficult to summarize my feelings, but I'm going to give it a try. This is basically a mixture of alternate history, science fiction, and a Western. There are 2 parallel stories in this book, told in 2 literal novels within the book, as well as through letters, handwritten notes, drawings. One takes place in the distant future in a dystopian Republic of Texas. The other storyline takes place in the 19th century in the United States, shortly before this alternate history period takes place. So the whole book, you are trying to find ways in which these two storylines coincide. I cannot go into too much detail without spoiling things from the book, but I really just don't know how I felt about this. There were elements of it that I loved, and I did love the unique storytelling aspects to it. I thought certain things he did were genius, and other things he did were trying too hard. The ending of this book is very confusing. You will see a lot of people talking about how the ending of this book is very confusing. It's not confusing in a way that, well, I wasn't paying attention, so I don't know what's going on kind of confusing, but in a way of, wow, this wasn't explained well enough, and that's why no one is understanding this confusing. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I don't regret that I read it, and I do want to read more novels kind of like this in the future, but at the end of the day, I'm thinking it just wasn't for me. If you've read any of the books or want to talk to me about any of the books that I read or attempted to read during the month of October, you can of course leave that in the comment section below. I am also accessible a variety of different places on social media if you'd like to get in contact with me elsewhere, and the links to all my profiles are in the description box below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.